Welcome everyone to the final episode of the Naughty Dog Reviews. It's hard to believe that it's already here, and honestly I'm going to be really sad to see it go. Almost all of the games in the series have had an impact on me at different points in my life, and I'm so glad that I've been able to talk about each and every single one of them. I want to thank those of you who have tuned in so far, and despite the game that we're about to talk about, I hope that this will serve as a solid conclusion to it all. Luckily, I won't be finishing this off alone. I'll actually be joined by another YouTuber who makes similar videos to mine. So yeah, welcome BranSnakes. Would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hey, what's up, dude? Yeah, I've been watching your recent reviews on the rest of the Naughty Dog games, and I'm really looking forward to hearing your thoughts on The Last of Us Part 2. Naughty Dog is probably my favorite dev studio of all time, so getting a chance to talk about them with another huge fan is going to be fun, even if we may have slightly different opinions on it.
Yeah, The Last of Us Part 2 was an incredibly divisive game, so almost everyone has a different response to it. You and I share a pretty similar opinion on this game, but I would say I'm a little more positive on it, although I absolutely understand all of what you don't like about it. So what I'm going to do in this video is listen to what BranSnakes has to say about the game, and then I'll go through and talk about what I agree or disagree with, while also giving some of my own thoughts. One more thing to mention is that this review will be full of spoilers, so if you want to play the game for yourself, don't watch this until you have. Now you can go ahead and start talking about your problems with this game.
I finished this game feeling just unsatisfied. The story was, in my opinion, the biggest letdown and left me questioning if a sequel was even necessary. And maybe that's what Naughty Dog were going for. As soon as this game was announced, we all couldn't wait to jump back into this world with Joel and Ellie again, but of course that's not exactly what happens here. All because of this surgeon guy that Joel killed, who, as we learn in Part 2, was actually such a nice guy who helps zebras. Joel's been doing this thing for over 20 years at this point. He's probably killed at least a few hundred people, judging from the amount of casualties in the first game alone. So now, after all those people he's killed, be it military, hunters, Firefly soldiers, finally it's this specific guy who had someone in his family who wanted to avenge his death, who just so happened to be the superior Ellie 2.0.
Okay, so about the story leaving you unsatisfied, I actually have to agree with that. Initially, I was happy with how the ending played out, so much so that it was actually what inspired me to make this channel. I was originally going to start the channel with The Last of Us Part 2 review, and I even wrote an entire script for it that obviously won't be used for this video, because it wasn't made with a collab in mind. Anyways, the point is, I thought very highly of the game at first. While I still like it, the time that's passed since it came out has made me realize that its impression on me didn't last nearly as long as that of the first game. The Last of Us 1 left me feeling like I wanted more so badly, and I never stopped thinking about how much I would love to get a sequel. After finishing this game though, I don't even know if I want to see what happens next with how depressing the conclusion was. So yeah, I can definitely understand the ending leaving you unsatisfied. Are there any other big issues you had with the game?
The switch to Abby's perspective for me wasn't exactly something that I enjoyed. Look, I get it. Naughty Dog wanted to show that there's two sides to every story, how revenge isn't always the right answer, but at the end of the day, I just didn't find her to be a great character in the first place. And it's kinda hard to make her likable when she was Joel's killer, and Naughty Dog tried really hard to make her likable by forcing us to go on a 12-hour journey with her right after a huge cliffhanger. It was at this point where I felt the game was directionless. The main objective was to kill Abby, but now it's like go out and fight the scars with a pregnant woman, then you gotta look for Owen, but then you find Yara and Lev and they have their own problems. If you came into this game just for Joel and Ellie because you loved their relationship in the first game, you're not going to see much of that here.
I actually have a lot to say about this aspect of the story. Personally, I think that Abby was a great character and that Naughty Dog did a great job at fleshing her out and making it so I didn't hate her with such a strong passion like I did when she was introduced. Despite that though, I definitely agree that the choice to dedicate half the game to her side of the story was questionable. This is part of my biggest problem with this game, which is its pacing. The first half of the game has you playing as Ellie traveling through Seattle to find and kill all of the people who were responsible for Joel's death. This section takes place all within 3 days, and right when you get to the climax of all that you've played so far, the game cuts to black and you start your journey as Abby. Now I knew that the game was going to try to humanize Abby, and I think it did a pretty good job doing that, but unfortunately it was at the cost of taking up half of the entire game. Playing through Abby's section feels incredibly dragged out when all you can think about is getting back to the climax that was teased right before it. Having to play through her side of the 3 days in Seattle is irritating enough, but it's made even worse by the amount of flashbacks within flashbacks that are in the game. The story is told in such an odd order that it just feels like a huge mess. Another glaring issue with Abby's side of the story that I haven't heard anyone else bring up is the fact that about a third of it is spent having you get medicine to heal someone's arm, only for her to be killed off right after that. This death is clearly done for shock value and doesn't achieve anything except making me feel like I wasted my time. And while we're on the subject, this game kills off way too many characters for no good reason. Jesse, who could have potentially been one of the best new characters in the series, was shot in the head and killed just to get a reaction out of us, and then it's pushed aside like it's nothing. At least we still have Owen, who's probably shaping up to be my favorite character on Abby's side of the— oh, well, he's dead too. There's no reason to spend so much of the game's runtime developing these characters just to kill them off like it's nothing. Anyways, those are really my main issues with the game. Do you have anything in particular that you liked about it?
Despite my issues with the story, I do think the game was still good in some aspects. Even though I was playing this game on a base PS4, the game looks incredible. Naughty Dog are known for placing huge emphasis on all the small details and have pushed these consoles to their limits. And also the amount of accessibility options sets a new standards for how they should be done by games in the future. While gameplay remains fairly similar to the first game, there have been a few noteworthy additions that made it stand out. The biggest thing for me was the inclusion of dogs when you're trying to play the game in stealth, as you're constantly kept on your toes. Hiding behind the same piece of cover for hours, waiting for enemies to come to you isn't a reliable strategy anymore, since the dogs can sniff you out, forcing you to stay on the move trying to avoid detection.
Yeah, I actually think the gameplay in this game has dramatically improved over the first game. The first game had excellent gameplay for a game that was so focused on its story, but playing it today feels a little bit clunky in comparison to newer games released. The Last of Us 2 has what is probably the best stealth gameplay I've ever played. There were the dogs as mentioned by Bran, but there were also things like grass to hide in and much smarter AI to deal with. I streamed my entire grounded playthrough for this game, and it was much harder than the first game because of the way the AI behaved. They detect you the second that they see you, and they're not afraid to push in and kill you while you're hiding. This is also helped by the improved level design. All of the encounters felt varied and made you approach them in new ways. The only disappointing thing is how the game was advertised as having these big open world areas such as downtown Seattle, but that's the only one that appears throughout the game. It's not too big of a deal though, since the rest of the areas are still more open in general than they were before. There are also more simple additions like the ever so satisfying weapon upgrade animations. Good God, I need more supplies so I can see that again. Anyways, that covers most of what I have to say about the game, so now you can go ahead and finish up your thoughts on it.
So yeah, that was just my brief take on The Last of Us Part 2. Like I said, the game is still fine for the most part, and I'm still looking forward to whatever Naughty Dog decide to do next. And if they add multiplayer for this game, then I will absolutely come back to check that out. But anyways, thank you ZayneDomain for inviting me onto your channel, and I'm looking forward to seeing what content you have planned in the future. Cheers.
Absolutely, and thank you so much for being here. It was great to have you to help me finish up this series that I've been doing since the start of my channel. So yeah, The Last of Us 2 is a divisive sequel to say the least. Many think it's an absolute dumpster fire that should have never been sold to players, while others go as far as to say that it's absolute perfection sent to us by the heavens. In reality, The Last of Us Part 2 is neither of those. This game is a flawed sequel that doesn't quite serve as a worthy successor to the original narratively. At the same time, however, it still has all of the care and attention to detail that Naughty Dog is famous for, which makes it one of the most visually impressive games ever made, while also giving us some great gameplay additions. Considering all of these things, I would personally give this game an 8 out of 10, but I asked BranSnakes what his score on the game was, and he told me he'd give it a 6 out of 10. Since I can understand all of his criticisms, I'm going to average out those two scores, which leaves The Last of Us Part 2 with a 7 out of 10. And with that, we've officially reached the end of this review series. I'm so glad that I started my channel with this, and I had such a great time getting to revisit all these games I've played throughout my life. Thank you so much to those of you who've been watching as I learn how to make these type of videos, and I hope that you all will stick around for whatever I decide to do next. That's it for this video though, so if you enjoyed, I ask that you please leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time.